We raised everything on the farm we could. And so that was like the 4-H club back then. Later on, I was in the 4-H club, but Aunt Thelma was being the oldest of the girls. Granddaddy would cater to what she wanted to do more. And but one night they heard some noise, and Granddaddy got up and looked out the window, and you could see somebody passing a lantern back and forth, and then he realized that they were stealing the turkeys. So he got dressed right quick, and by the time he come out there, they had the turkeys loaded on a truck and were driving away. So he got up the road about 2 blocks, is where our closest neighbor lived, and his name was Pete Murphy. And so Daddy and him would build up a good neighborly relationship. And when Daddy drove up the side of his window, says, "Pete is stealing my turkeys. Come on and help me." He said, "Well, let me get my shotgun." He got his shotgun and put it in the back seat of the car. And the roads weren't paved back then. They could track that tire from that truck all the way to the Wayne County line, Wilson County, right close. And so Mr. Pete had a lantern. He held it up. They caught him by surprise, taking the turkeys off of one truck and loading them on another truck. And Mr. Pete said, "Josh," said, "you hold my gun on them till I go to Goldsboro and get the sheriff." He said, if they don't do what you tell them to do, you blow their brains out. When Daddy come back with the officer, and by that time they were leaving. But I can't remember. Seemed like the sheriff did catch them before they got 4, and they locked them up. And later the next week or two, the man that was confessed to it, he was from Bullhead up toward the Wayne County line, and he figured he'd get out of jail quicker, maybe, and so he confessed to it. And but about that time was when Daddy was a county commissioner. My daddy was a county commissioner 8 years, and the last time it was about 1933 or 4, and when he was leaving home to register for running for county commissioner again, my mother said, "Daddy, if you're going to stay in politics, run for an office that pays a salary." So we went back and did that, and he was lucky enough so in the campaign vote, he came in number one. And,
And what office did he run for?
run for clerk of court. So, he held a job being clerk of court for 30-some years during World War II. And during that time, there were different neighbors talked to him about the experience they had with the turkeys and the man stealing them. And Mr. Pete told him, said all that time Josh was holding with the shotgun, they won't even a shell in the gun. We had a good relationship growing up on the farm, I'll tell you that. We raised our own mules. See, George's granddaddy was a number one farmer, considered one of the biggest farmers in Greene County. And during that time when can't get what I'm trying to say about it. Well, I had a.
He'll come back to you. Yeah. All right.
I forgot what we were now. But we had a good relationship growing up on the farm. And his granddaddy, George, well, his grandmother, say, was my daddy's sister. So we were double Mewborns. And,
Triple.
yeah, so when I forgot what I was going to say.
You was going to say, why did it, about keeping family? Tell them that.
Oh, we raised,
Mules?
we had a bad fire one night.
No, you were
I
going
was about that big and I grew up, I saw it from the house where I was in the bed. And I went far enough to the door to see what was going on, and there was several of the neighbors came to draw water out of the well and tried to put the fire out, but they couldn't put the fire out. It was just too far down and it burned
This was the
four mules out. The next day when my daddy was being a county commissioner, this was in July, he was off in Wilmington at a convention of the North Carolina Board of Commissioners. And so when we got word to him, he come home, and by that time, the local people that were in charge of the highway department back then, he came with some trustees and convicts and they threw dirt on a pile of corn to keep it from smoking. They were trying to keep the smoking down. But after that, Mr. Cazard in Wilson run the warehouse, tobacco warehouse, where we carried our tobacco, and he sent my daddy word that he had a note signed for him if he wanted to buy whatever he wanted to buy on that note. So my daddy went to Wilson, and Mr. Pete lived up that road. he says, Josh says, if you want to save some money, instead of buying mules, buy some of those mares. He said, my boys will work them and break them for you. And so during that time, George's granddaddy, he got interested in the mules and the mares, and so he decided to buy, George's granddaddy decided to buy what we called a jack back then, but it was a small animal that you crossbred it with a horse mare, and you raise mules that way. And that's one of the ways that we got saved money in a lot of ways, and people were nice to him about donating different things. And so he was lucky about being in a political way. He had a lot of friends that helped keep him in office. World War II got over, everybody thought that George's daddy, being assistant to the clerk of court, as long as he was, they thought he would be interested in the job, so they offered it to him, but he said, well, I know what Uncle Joshua has to spend every 4 years to stay in office. He said, I'd rather take a job at the bank where I got a feeling of working and not having to spend money every 4 years. So when about the time that would own it so happened that the Wachovia Bank was building a new branch in Walstenburg, and it worked just right for George his daddy to go over there and be the chief officer at the Wachovia Bank in Walstenburg. Then after that, he came back to Snow Hill when, after he had worked about 7 or 8 years over there. And they made him a finance officer for Greene County. So
That was after George Edwards retired.
it was George Edwards had kept the job, and George Edwards was one of our relatives that he was so much smarter than we were. We didn't talk about him except when he needed help. But George Edwards would help. My daddy's nephew and him, when they worked in the courthouse, they were the head officers, you might say.
Henry, tell us about when you and Uncle Josh were young and playing baseball.
Well,
You guys were quite the two on the baseball field, weren't you?
everything, we were growing up on the farm, we had to milk 2 cows in the morning before we went to school. And ever since my brother got to play baseball, he loved it. So I was not the athletic kind. I messed with a ham radio. when Uncle Roy asked me one day, I said something about getting off, and I worked for my daddy's brother during right after World War II. I come back from where I went, not trying to dodge the draft, but it just worked out that my uncle was swollen at that time, and they wouldn't take me in the army. But I took a course in in wiring ships, marine wiring, and when I went to, I got on the train to go to Wilmington, Delaware, and I went to sleep on the train in the day coach. And I didn't get off and stopped.
Tell them where you were when it stopped.
The conductor woke me up and I was giving my ticket. He said, "You should have got off of this train before," but said, "As soon as this train stops, you get off and stand on the platform till another train comes back going that way. And you get on it, and they'll take you back where you were planning to go." So during that time, I was trying to kill time, you might say. And I got a telephone directory about that thick. He looked at I happened to think about my sister that lived at Reading. And I looked up her number and called her collect, and she invited me to come on over up there and get on the train that morning. And they met me, and I stayed with them for the rest of that year. It was while the country was at war with Hitler over there, and it was just one of those times that I didn't know what to do with myself, except I didn't want to go back home. So while I was in Pennsylvania, I worked in a steel mill. And they got me a job there, so I didn't have to go back to Wilmington shipyard. And when I came back to after my next birthday, I was 19, and then I came home and on the bus, the bus drove in Raleigh around there. It just so happened that the bus rode by the telephone office, and that's while I was waiting for the bus. When I went back, I got the telephone number of the people there, and then when I went back to Pennsylvania, they helped me get transferred. So I had a job working with telephone people in Raleigh and Goldsboro, and during that time, Mike, my daddy had a hernia that was bothering him real bad, and he wrote me a letter and told me if boss would let me get off long enough to come stay with him long enough to. So I went, showed that to my boss. He said, "Certainly you go help your parents first." So I come home and stayed with my mother and daddy for a good while. And during that time, though, George's daddy was my daddy's assistant in the courthouse, and he would where my daddy would and George to get ready to go to lunch. There's a lot of times they could drive out to mother's house and eat some of her collards and get better lunch that way. I don't know, it was just during the Depression you done the best you could with what you had to do with. So I don't know what else
About why the double Mewborns married, and he needs to share that with you all.
say that what was that about.
about the Mewborns marrying,
The double Mewborns.
the double Mewborns, why couldn't they marry?
Oh, well, there's a lot of people teasing about, claiming to be kin, like double first cousin and like that. And then the people got to making us up some slang. So, well, they want to keep the money in the family.
What level there is, I know there.
So, when, Mr. Peacock was a man that was, neighborhood, he wasn't related to us, but they used to have baseball in the local cow pasture or wherever, big enough to play ball, and Mr. Peacock got to talking too loud, so the constable told him if he couldn't keep quiet, he would go lock him up in the guardhouse. And sure enough, he kept right on rooting for the team that he liked. And so the constable took him and said, I'm going to keep you in here till the game's over now. They let him pay a fine. And he said, his name was Jesse Mewborn, I believe. He said, can I talk now? And he said, well, certainly you can. But says, let my friend Peacock talk first, because he was there first at the whole ball game, and he was, anyway, he said, Mr. Peacock, they give him a chance to speak. He says, I have always heard that the Mewborns were the ugliest damn people in the world. And I want you to know that I think you and your family are thoroughbreds. This was back in the 30s during the Depression, and my daddy was in politics, and he would, wherever he went, he would inject whether it's a politician call or a preacher's call. But one Saturday morning, he was used to coming up here being pastor of this church. That's, I'm talking about this man in the picture up here, Joshua Mewborn. And the Stantonburg is right close to the Greene County line up here, and there's a lot of residents that claim residency in both counties, and so somehow he had obligated to buy a refrigerator, which back then we couldn't, in the country, we didn't have the right kind of energy voltage to, so we had to have our own plant. You know, the more well-to-do farmers back in the early days, they would have their own batteries in the engine plant. And so our granddaddy, when he got elected clerk of court, on Saturday morning, he always reserved Saturday morning from his job so he could come up here and preach, be co-pastor in this church. So that being his way of having two jobs at one stone, we call it. I don't know what I started out to tell now, but
About the freezer.
The
but,
refrigerator.
the Shingleton Brothers store hardware people during the Depression, they sold the earliest refrigerator that instead of running it on current, it run on kerosene. You had to it had a kerosene tank. And Granddaddy was ready to, being Saturday, besides being a farmer and having cows and overseeing that part of it, but he got into practice of coming up here to be the pastor on Saturday when they had a meeting, and then they had another meeting on Sunday. It was always on the second Saturday and the second Sunday of each month when he would getting ready to go to be the pastor Saturday morning. The store, the man from the hardware store in Stansburg bought an old burning refrigerator, which my mother never had one before. And he was, Granddaddy was in the habit of getting ready to go to redress so he could come up here and be the pastor. And when that truck drove up with that refrigerator on it, it being a political obligation involved too, he knew he had to wait on the man. And so he told him when he was getting off driving, he was going to get in the car and drive up here. He said, you go ahead and put the refrigerator in, and we'll see what's paying you later or whatever. So he left, and I don't know how he came back, but they had to take they found out that the physical size of the refrigerator was too large to go in the door, and he wanted to stay there and talk to the delivery man about getting a smaller unit instead of that one, but he already had it on his truck ready to deliver, and that's what he knew. And he knew he could use a little bit of salesmanship and know how to carry it back. So they had the helper he brought with him, they had to take the door off of the porch door so they could get that refrigerator in the house. But,
What was your favorite flavor ice cream?
But it would make ice cream. You had to have it like a woman's touch to it. But I know once we got it in there, he went on back and left, and Granddaddy never, for my knowledge, he never said anything else about it. And when it came time, he paid for it. But
Yeah.
during that time, our my mother, she had to learn how to use it. Had trays in it like a standard refrigerator. But the part about him, about time they found out they had to pull that casing over the door to get it in the house. That's when the part of it, I didn't catch it all.
Uh-huh.
I don't think he used any profanity, but they got, somehow or another, he was aiming for that refrigerator to go somewhere else but between my mother wanting one so bad, she didn't want to see that one leave.
Right. That was good. Thank you, Henry.
So that's about it now.